everybody, and welcome to the show. Settle down, strap in, sit back, and relax, because it's time for Good Hacks. You already know what it is by now. He's Max, I'm Tim. Welcome to the show. We've got a loaded episode for you, as always. We're talking about MVP races, new faces, and a throwback to an old school video game that has gotten us thinking about some pretty cool new ideas. But before we get into that, haven't done this the last couple of weeks, so Max, I'm going to do my best impression of some paparazzi at a movie premiere and ask you, what are you wearing? What are those?
So, for someone who's just listening, I'll say I'm wearing a Manny Pena jersey.
Okay.
Because then it's going to give you the incentive to tune in on YouTube at GoodHacks Pod, or maybe we'll clip this off on Twitter. It's actually just a pineapple T-shirt that I have. I don't know if you can see that.
I think we can.
You might be able to.
I think so.
But yeah, shout out Manny Pena on the Brewers. Hey, Players Weekend is coming.
That's fantastic.
It's in, I want to say 2 weekends from now, at the very end of August. We'll get to that though. Next podcast, I think we'll dive into those nicknames.
Yeah, a lot of players, and we'll talk about, are wearing just emojis or some combinations thereof.
Well, remember Brad Boxberger?
That was going to be my example. Yeah, he used to wear the box burger. That was his entire.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
legendary.
even as 2 years ago, maybe. But
who's on the? Is there someone with a tree on the Rays?
Oh,
on the
yeah.
Rays?
On the Rays? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
I
need to look through all of them.
I need a refresher on those. But like Nick Martini has like an actual, just like a martini glass on his back. Those would be fun.
Well, what would yours be, really quick?
Well, I mean, slightly embarrassing.
Or you don't know yet.
It's only slightly embarrassing. But I got the nickname Hacksaw in high school. So if there was a saw emoji, hacksaw is a specific type of saw, but I would settle for any kind of saw. I'm pretty sure that emoji does exist.
Yeah, no, mine would be Buenhombre.
Okay.
Buenhombre of the week. You guys know the segment. We'll get to that.
That's coming up. It's on the docket.
I think that would work well.
No, actually, that is a good idea. I
or
think
maybe
that does fit.
Bad woman instead of good man. I've gotten that before.
Right.
Not my best.
Bad woman. Sure, I guess so. Evil woman. I don't know. Why not?
I digress, though.
Well, I'm wearing a Northwestern volleyball shirt. It's simple, but their season starts at the end of the month. I'm really excited.
Go Cats.
Last month, you had a Northwestern football shirt. I'm running out of baseball-themed shirts, to be honest with you.
We originally were going to wear baseball graphic tees, I think was what we were going for. And we only have so many things in our wardrobe. I hope you understand.
Yeah, I know. Like, I wish I had every single, baseball jersey available or whatever, which I know some people have endeavored to make that part of their collection. I do not own all of that. So I wore band shirts the last couple of weeks.
The Cespedes BBQ guys have a bunch of jerseys.
That is exactly, that is who I was thinking of, actually.
That's something to strive for.
Well, I have one more baseball-themed shirt saved up, and next week might be our last episode in this format with this situation. We don't really know for sure, so maybe I'll whip that out for next week. Maybe.
We'll let you know what's coming down the pipe.
But that's next week. Let's stick in the here and now for right now. Look, we'll go back to the past briefly. Because last week we teased, we were going to talk a little bit about those teams from New York. The Yankees have destroyed the Orioles all year, full stop. And also in terms of hitting home runs, Gleyber Torres especially. We can go on and on about that, but let's focus on the quote-unquote other team in New York, the Mets, which are one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest team.
Sure.
And now that we've passed the All-Star break and finally the elimination numbers are on the standings, this is when this becomes my favorite time of year. The tragic numbers are finally up.
The WCE column.
I like tragic number better. It's a little easier to say, I guess.
Yeah.
That's finally, teams are starting to realize we don't have all season now. We've got 40 games left until the playoffs start. A month and a half, really, as we're here in the middle of August. So now that the tragic numbers are finally here, the Mets still one of the hottest teams in baseball. It's what we've been talking about all second half, the season after the All-Star break. Other hot teams. Right now, that's the Mets. They've scuffled a little bit this week specifically, but after the All-Star break, they've been tremendous.
Yeah.
Here's the most basic of all questions. What do you think?
Let's go through the facts first. Since the All-Star break, they are 20-9 as of Thursday afternoon when we started recording this. They went on a stretch. You guys remember it. From July 25th to August 10th, they were 15-1. Some crazy victories, some walk-offs. But we're giving them the credit that they're due. They've been playing really well. But when you look at the teams that they're playing, and I'll list off the teams that they've played since the All-Star break: Marlins, Twins, Giants, Padres, Pirates, White Sox, Pirates again, Marlins again, Nationals, and now the Braves. So let's not count the Braves or the Nationals. They were on that 20-6 stretch, so it leaks a little bit into the National Series. 3 of those losses were against the Giants, and the Giants were hot at that time.
That was the time when the Giants were really good. And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. The Giants had all those extra innings games, a couple of walk-offs of their own. There was a 16-inning game where the Syndergaard versus Bumgarner matchup.
Sure.
We talked about that, I think, 2 or 3 episodes ago, but that was that time of the year.
Right.
Those games could have gone either way, potentially.
Yeah, and now the Giants are 4.5 out, so we can say that they're out of contention.
They're cold.
To a certain extent.
I don't know, but they are certainly cold.
And the Mets, they just lost their last 3, and they're playing the Braves. Now they've fallen back to 3 games out. You remember, at the very end of that 20-6 stretch, I believe they were in a wild card spot, if not 1 game back.
I think, maybe a game or game and a half
Which
back.
is obviously where you want to be. That's striking distance. And the hoopla, as it were, in New York and around the nation and on Twitter and on MLB Network and everything is all about this team. They have so many great pieces, a lot of young talent, a great rotation, one of the best. But when I look at those teams that I listed off, they played the Twins only twice. They won both of those games against the Twins. That's probably the best team that they played in that stretch.
No question.
And then the Giants at that time were a contender, so I guess you would understand that they went 3-4.
Okay.
Excuse me,
1-3.
They
Right.
lost 3 out of 4. But the other teams on that list, you're supposed to beat those teams. In my opinion, if you're going to say that this is a contending team, they should have already been in contention, and this run should have vaulted them past others in this race. Now they go 0-3 in their last 3 games against division rivals, against a wild card foe and a division leader, and now they're 3 games back. At this point in the season, 3 games back is not where you want to be, because you lose a couple more in a row and you're all of a sudden out of it. Like we just said, the Giants are only 1.5 games further back, and we're saying that they're out of it.
Good point. Yep.
Also, when you look at who they're playing next, and I wanted to mention this last week, they play, I'll just pull up the schedule. That's what our computers are for. So after this series with the Braves, they go to Kauffman Stadium. They play the Royals. That should be a sweep.
Wow.
Maybe. You would think that they will win
the
those
series,
games.
Right.
Then they play the Indians, Braves, Cubs, Phillies.
It's a way to end a month for sure.
Nationals, Phillies, D-backs, Dodgers, through halfway through September. I didn't count that as I said it, but it's about 10 series in a row. If you consider the D-backs are contenders, after they play the Royals, those are all contenders that they're playing in a row.
Everybody's above 500.
It just so happened that their schedule worked out like this, where they played, no disrespect, bad teams, not contending teams, and now
it's realistic.
End of August into September, great teams, contending teams. And these are teams that are fighting for spots too. This isn't like, they're playing the Patriots when they've already clinched the division and they're not going to play Tom Brady.
Sure.
These teams are going to play their best players because not only are they still in the hunt, but they're tuning up for a postseason run.
Every single one of those teams, except for maybe the Dodgers at the middle of September, a month from now.
Sure. Because they're going to be far enough
They're going to
ahead.
be the number 1 seed
Yeah.
in the National League. They don't need anything else necessarily, but every other team will have something to play for at that point.
So the synopsis, long story short here, because now you know the facts, I want to hop on the bandwagon. I'm excited for them, but I don't think that they're for real, even after that stretch. Because you have to figure that they're going to go 500, if not lower, in this next month, playing all of these contending teams. You end the season with Colorado, Cincinnati, Miami, and then Atlanta. And you have to figure that they're going to have to go close to, if not perfect, those last 4 series, the last half month of September. I don't know if they can do it. I really don't. They don't play any games in October. Sometimes the
it bleeds over a little
season leaks over into the 1st of October. But McNeil just went down on the IL.
Yep.
That's recent news. So they called up Ruben Tejada. We were talking about the fact that he hasn't been in a Met uniform since the Chase Utley fiasco when he slid into second in the playoffs. What do you think? I don't think that they're for real. I don't think that they make the playoffs. I don't know if that's cynical of me. I always say that. And it's definitely a negative way to look at that team with their amazing rotation and their young pieces. I just don't think they're going to get it.
You could be as cynical as you want. It's your prediction. It's your analysis. And unfortunately, I agree with you. Because I'm going to be as cynical as well. You say you got to believe, but I just don't. Yeah. I don't believe that this team has enough pieces, especially now with McNeil gone for the foreseeable future. And even Robbie Cano out for probably maybe even the rest of the year. And
Forgot about him.
He hasn't even been perfect this year by any stretch. I think everybody knew that he was kind of the second piece in that trade with the Mariners, where Edwin Diaz was the big piece, and they brought in Cano and decided to pay for a lot of his contract. So he hasn't been great this year, but he's still a starter, and he deserved to be a starter.
And he's experienced too.
I have no doubt about that. And so you would think that he would help for a playoff run, or a playoff push rather. So now that's why they bring in Joe Panik. And now that McNeil is hurt, that's why you call up Ruben Tejada. Like you say, hasn't played for the Mets since, I think, 2016. Barely played in the majors since then as well. He was hurt after that, and slowly but surely getting his way back. Was solid AAA this year, but what does that mean? Right. I think the rest of this team is just not good enough. So before I get to the second point, let me just finish with this. I was watching the late stages of the Mets game against the Braves on Wednesday, and I don't remember the situation precisely, but suffice to say it was the ninth inning. They had brought in a run to make it a 3-run game, I think, or a 2-run game at that point, and they brought in a pinch hitter. They used Luis Guillorme. That's your pinch hitter. Dude's got 7 hits all year and 40 ABs.
I honestly don't even know who that is.
Precisely correct. He's hitting under 200 because I think he actually did get an infield single on that play, so great, but that's your pinch hitter.
So you're saying that their depth is a flaw?
Precisely. I mean, even the rest of the outfield is not that great. I think J.D. Davis is an okay player, but he is not really there yet. Yeah. Juan Lagares is still a regular. We could go on and on. I just don't think that the rest of the team. Pete Alonso's amazing. He's been tremendous this year. He's a wonderful hitter. He's going to win the National League Rookie of the Year. It's my prediction and everybody else's. I think McNeil is underrated, undervalued now. His WAR as if you want to value with that, is on par with Alonso's. It's been higher at times this year as well. So he's an underappreciated part of this team. And then, the guys that you always mention, like Conforto, Ahmed Rosario, who I still think has all the potential in the world. There are other pieces there, so you have a good core contingent, but the rest of the offense around them is really lacking. And I don't know, the flip side to it, what we've talked about since the trade deadline, that rotation. The reason that you go out and get Marcus Stroman, add him to the rotation, is because for a stretch run like this, you think that your pitching is going to help carry you to the playoffs and then beyond, obviously. So I guess that's the flip side is, do you think that this rotation is good enough to overcome those weaknesses of the other people, if you will, of the team? Can Todd Frazier hit a late-game home run like he did the other day every time, or is it going to have to be Steven Matz coming out throwing a quality start and then getting pulled early by Mickey Callaway, and they go to the bullpen and Seth Lugo gives up the game against the Braves like he did the other day? What's going to happen? Because we talked about on the last triple play, this bullpen isn't really very good. So are you going to trust Lugo to keep up what he did last month? He was great last month for sure. Is not going to keep up, or are you going to rely on Chris Mazza and Flexen and Luis Avilan and people like that to help the rest of the team around a mediocre Edwin Diaz to support those 5 really good starters? I don't see that happening.
It's like we are telepathically on the same page. I was literally going to say that their comeback against the Nationals was anchored by Todd Frazier, who was beloved and he's a hometown guy, but do you really think that the Todd father is going to hit that home run every single time? Obviously, no one's going to hit it every single time, but you don't trust that to happen frequently, whereas you would with a perennial all-star and MVP candidate that other teams have. And then I told you about Seth Lugo potentially having the Kyle Bearclaw effect. Remember last year, Bearclaw won the reliever of the month at one point around now in the season and then completely unraveled. I don't know if it's because people are going to see Lugo more. You start to play division rivals a lot at this time of the season, or maybe it's just because he's starting to face better competition in the Braves.
Certainly
but
helps.
It was his fault. They lost that game. He comes in, he gives up 5 runs in the 7th inning after Steven Matz had a tremendous start, and he's your 5. So you have to figure that the rotation is going to keep them in games. But the question is there depth enough to score runs late in games, or are you relying on guys like Todd Frazier to help you out? And is their bullpen enough? Is Edwin Diaz going to turn it around? Is Lugo going to continue to stay good instead of start to unravel, like I said? I don't think that it's going to happen. You don't think it's going to happen. Mets fans think it's going to happen. They believe. But that is a crazy schedule this next month, Tim.
That's true.
And it's one thing to beat teams that you're supposed to beat. They are who they thought. They are who the Mets thought they were going to be.
Pete Alonso believes.
Right. LF.
Yep.
MG. No, wow, I'm all over the place. What
LFGM.
Is it? LFGM. That is a tongue twister, folks.
It is actually
I tried
very
to be
difficult.
cool. I tried to use the hashtag, and I couldn't do it.
That's right. We'll have a second take. Look,
Yeah.
The last thing about this is that we talked about this with the Indians a month removed, is that they went on a tear and came back to tie the Twins and even surpass the Twins in the AL Central for a day or two there. They're still neck and neck at that division on Thursday when we were recording this, because they beat all the teams they were supposed to. And those were your words talking about the Indians a couple of weeks ago.
Sure.
And now they had to, at the start of August, play all better teams all of a sudden. But I guess the difference here is I think I would rather do that and have my schedule more or less even out come September, and now you're playing somewhat balanced. And, of course, the rest of that division is bad. The Mets don't really have that advantage. But the fact that the Indians have to play better teams now at the start of August, I think is better for them. Is even if they lose a bunch of games, there's still time to recover against decent and bad and other good teams in September. The Mets have that same schedule, just pushed back 3 weeks.
Right.
So they have all these good teams going into the start of September. And so then, like you said, there's every chance those last 4 series, 3 of which are against bad teams, there's every chance those series become critically important. By then it might be too late.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, we always say we'll see. The Mets could absolutely go off, win their last game or 2 against the Braves, and then just take off against these good teams and use the Royals as a launching pad, as it were. But they could also fall flat on their face right now, and then you have to think, well, why didn't they sell more? Or why didn't they buy more?
Right, sure.
So all eyes are on their new GM. Is Callaway's seat hot if they don't make the playoffs? A lot of storylines with the Mets leading into this offseason regarding what outcome their end of the regular season is.
All those other teams, we've talked about this and we'll continue to, all those other teams in the glut for the wild card, they're all good. They're all teams that preseason one would have, and we probably did, pick to make the playoffs. I'm talking about teams like St. Louis, Philadelphia with all their offseason stuff, Washington, you know how good they always are, even Milwaukee. If you pick the Cubs to win the division preseason, which few people did, so maybe throw the Cubs into that mix as well.
Right.
So those are 5 other really good teams who are battling for those 2 wildcard spots. Obviously, there's the NL Central in the mix as well. So 4 teams for those 2 wildcard spots. Unquestionably good teams in my opinion, and those 4 teams to me are on paper better than those 3 teams that are chasing the pack. In some order, the Mets, the D-backs, and the Giants.
Right. They
seem like better teams. That's been your criticism of the Giants all year. So if you, regardless of how hot they were at the end of July, you stack them up against, let's just pick the Cardinals. Cardinals look better, don't they, overall, right, even with, a resurgent Madison Bumgarner, probably maybe better than whoever the Cardinals have to counter with that. Everything else about the Cardinals seems better, at least in my opinion. And that's another reason why I don't think the Mets will do this.
And last note for me is, you mentioned those teams in this race. We don't know who is making those wild card spots. We don't know who in the very last week is going to be 1 game ahead of the Mets in a hypothetical situation. So now you start to think about tiebreakers and who's played more games. So you really don't know what this is going to look like until the last week.
Yep, sure.
This is different or the same than most years in the sense that there are so many different teams that could still make this wild card, And the fact that there are 2 spots opens it up for more. I mean, the Giants could still make it. The D-backs could still make it. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
If the Giants end up being one of those teams, like you said, you don't know the tiebreaker.
They don't have
the Giants now have the advantage on the Mets just by virtue of winning that one series.
And so I don't know their record against the Nationals. I don't know their record against the Phillies, but they'll have played, 16 or 18 games against those 2?
Sure.
And maybe they didn't play well against them in the early parts of the season because clearly they needed to go 15-1 and 20-6 to get back into this race.
Sure.
So those in the 15-1, those 14 losses are somewhere earlier in the year. If they're against those contending teams and it comes down to a last game or 2, they're not going to be in a good spot. Well, or as good of a spot as they could have been.
I think it's fascinating, and we've been talking about this NL wild card for a while. Look, it's fascinating. I can't think of any other words, but frankly, the flip side to it, since I think there are 4 teams that are really fighting for those 2 spots, that means 2 really good teams are going to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
I mean, you could make the argument that, you could make an argument that 3 teams from the NL East should be in, 3 teams from the NL Central should be in, meaning that if divisions weren't a thing and every division didn't have to have a representative, if you just did straight up best records like they do in the NBA, for example, divisions don't matter, then you could have 3 teams from the NL East in some order.
Yeah.
Because the other team in the NL East that we haven't really talked about yet, only in passing, the Atlanta Braves, don't really need to worry about this whole wild card mess. They are thoroughly atop this division right now this week in the middle of August. And that's because they are anchored by somebody who nobody is surprised to see in this discussion, in the MVP discussion, Ronald Acuna. But before I go a little bit further ahead, the reason we wanted to talk about this is that Max and I both saw a story, and we've seen growing sentiments that Ronald Acuna should be considered for the National League MVP. That, in as many words, it's no longer a 2-man race, that the field is ready to expand. There is a legitimate 3rd candidate. This is unlike anything we've ever seen in American politics, where we've got the 2 front runners and you have a 3rd candidate. Those are always long shots. That's what I think this is. I don't think there is a legitimate 3rd candidate. I think that there are 2 candidates for National League MVP. We've talked about them since our very first episode, Christian Yelich and Cody Bellinger. And then there's the field. What do you think? Do we need to expand this field and give Ronald Acuna some actual MVP votes?
It's kind of like a Wednesday before a huge golf tournament.
Okay.
How the analysts will choose, do you think it's going to be Tiger? Do you think it's going to be Phil? We're talking like 10 years ago at this point. Or do you think it's going to be the field?
Right.
In the field, there are some great golfers. In the field, in the NL MVP race, there are tremendous hitters and pitchers. Freddie Freeman's having a great year. Anthony Rendon deserves consideration at some point, if not this year, then moving forward.
Give some pitchers some love. Scherzer,
Ryu, right. And he will
Ketel
probably
Marte.
win the Cy Young at this point.
Cy Young,
if not him, then maybe Kershaw
Cy
or
Young
something.
winners need some MVP love, in my opinion.
And Acuna is having an amazing year. The Braves are leading their division by 6 games. They're probably going to run away with their division, and he is incredibly valuable to that effort. And we can talk about what MVP means, but when you look at the stats and you try to stack up Acuna, Bellinger, and Yelich, and you just look at their basic, well-known stats. We're not getting into too much analytics here. In average, Yelich is leading. In home runs, as of Thursday, Yelich and Bellinger are tied, but since we wrote this down, Bellinger has hit his 40th home run.
Yep.
Youngest to do that in Dodgers history.
First in the league this year.
Acuna has more steals, and he is definitely on pace to be a 30-30 guy, if not 40-40 this year, which is crazy in itself.
Yeah.
And, if he ends up getting 40-40 this year and doesn't win the MVP, that's bonkers. But anyways, Bellinger's leading in RBI, and he has even more now that we haven't factored in. And then in WAR, which I think more people are getting accustomed to, Bellinger has a 7.6, Yelich a 5.9, Acuna a 5.2.
That's statistically significant differences.
So statistically, I think you give it to Cody Bellinger. I'm a Christian Yelich guy, and I want him to win back-to-back. That would be awesome. And I think that you could argue that he is far more valuable to the Brewers in terms of their movement towards the playoffs rather than Bellinger. Because minus Bellinger, there are other people that fill in, and that team is still incredibly good and probably wins the NL West.
I think that's fair.
But without Yelich, I don't think you consider the Brewers up there with the Cubs and Cardinals right now.
That was the comeback that I saw, is that somebody said, look, without Bellinger, the Dodgers are still probably at least in contention for best team in the National League.
Sure.
Without Yelich, where are the Brewers? And somebody came back and said, still in third place in the division. So it doesn't really matter.
Right. But then you could say the same with Acuna. Freeman is always good, but years from Donaldson and Albies and other guys on that team, without Acuna's absolutely amazing middle of the season that he's having right now, and I want to talk about what he's doing in August. I'll get right to that then. As of August 14th, in the month of August, he's played 13 games. He has 9 home runs, 17 ribbies, and 21 hits.
It's all right.
And at the point that you hear this at home, he might have 12 home runs in August, depending on when we clip this off and post it. So his pace in August is obviously unprecedented and tremendous, and that is why he is slowly climbing his way into this race. But it's not like Bellinger is cooling off at all. And Yelich has been hurt a little bit recently, but he's back, and he's going to hit some more home runs too. I don't think that Acuna could possibly be voted MVP when he is below at least one guy in the majority of offensive statistics in the National League.
What would Ronald Acuna or Ketel Marte or any of these other folks have to do to even warrant consideration? Because I think we're on the same page as usual here. Like I said, I kind of jumped to conclusions a little bit with my intro here. Still a two-man race, it seems, between Bellinger and Yelich, one way or the other.
Right.
I have my pick of the two. I think we've come to terms on that as well. As it stands right now, if the season ended today, things could still happen.
Right.
What would Ronald Acuna have to do to even warrant consideration into this conversation?
So he's only 6 home runs back now that Bellinger has 40. As of Thursday afternoon, he would be
absolutely nuts.
Less than that. He'd be 5 back. I think that not only does Acuna need to go 40-40, which would get him a lot of votes in terms of being a well-rounded asset.
There's not many people that have done that.
He needs to get his average above 300. He needs to crack 100 RBIs. He probably will. He has 82 right now. Yeah. But his WAR is 2.4 points lower than Bellinger. And a lot of writers today and people who are going to be voting on this pay attention to those analytics. And we're not even talking about more advanced stats about balls in play and exit velo and all of that stuff. Maybe Acuna does better in that. I don't know off the top of my head, but he needs to at least cut the deficit in WAR and in RBI and in these other major categories to then say, okay, he's not leading in these categories, but he's close enough to go along with a 40-40 year, which has only happened so many times. Right. Because Bellinger has 40 homers, but he has 9 steals. Sure. So a tremendous power display, but you could say Acuna is much more well-rounded in that respect.
I think that's fair to say. Look, the fun thing about WAR, and you hinted at this earlier, and I'm far from an expert on advanced stats. I'd love to learn a little bit more, and that's on me to do so, obviously. I think WAR and similar metrics are going to really help contextualize the MVP conversation. We get this in every sport, and this is what you hinted at. What does MVP really mean? And we can talk about this when we get closer to the end of the season again. We'll revisit this. But the words are most valuable player. But valuable is inherently a subjective word.
Absolutely.
So we made the jokes about Christian Yelich. Where would the Brewers be without far and away their best player with the poor pitching that they've had, just with all the injuries, could be forgiven to an extent. But where would that team be?
It's hard to say.
It's hard to say.
They would be a lot worse than they are right now.
I think that's absolutely fair to say. But based on those statistical metrics, which take into account all the offensive statistics, even defense, all these other things, try to control for some factors, WAR indicates that Cody Bellinger is more valuable to the game than Christian Yelich has been.
Almost 2 runs more.
2 wins more. He's worth a game and a half more in the standings
Yeah.
just by being himself, just by his production. So that means he's more valuable to the game, but that still doesn't mean he's most valuable to his team, because the Dodgers, as we've talked about, have keep calling up all these guys. You have 3 more guys waiting in the wings, it seems. So if Cody Bellinger doesn't play first, then maybe Edwin Rios comes up and he's got 20 home runs this year too. He's got a couple already since he's come up. Who knows? So WAR shows you, at least shows me, who's more valuable to the game and to the sport as a whole, but it still doesn't show you who's most valuable to his team per se. So does that matter? So this is why we'll flip it around. We talk about Mike Trout in the American League, and he might, I think there's an argument to be made, he probably should have more MVPs than he already does.
He's always in like the top 3.
He is always in the top 3, really, which is amazing in and of itself. But there's just, and I mentioned this at the very beginning of the year, there are always these surprise breakout guys that kind of come in and steal the show, like Javier Baez. I've made this reference before. I'm not saying he didn't deserve the MVP, but sometimes there are more consistent guys. Obviously, that's the National League, not the American League with Mike Trout. But Baez bursts onto the scene, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is an incredible season. This is the most valuable player. This is the most outstanding player, if you will. He's got my vote. And they were right to give him that vote. So somebody like Trout will go overlooked because he's just that consistently great. And in the National League, Acuna, this is only his first really full year, came up a month or so into last season, but he is so consistently good this year at 40-40 potential. Doesn't get more consistent than that necessarily, and even-handed, evenly balanced. But these other guys, Bellinger especially, just splashed onto the scene with such force and with such success. I think it's impossible to overlook him for this award at the end of the season.
Well, bottom line, I think that it's fair to say that Acuna will get a couple votes. I think that there are some people out there. I also don't know when the deadline is to submit these things. They always say that the playoffs don't factor in, but, I mean, let's say the Dodgers get bounced in the first round and the Braves win the World Series, and Acuna goes off in the playoffs. I feel like then you consider him.
I think all these types of awards always have to be regular season.
But that doesn't factor in, which sucks, because if that situation were to happen, he's your MVP. But I don't know what
that's more important, right? Because the Dodgers can have this amazing record and all this amazing run differential, and Bellinger can put up these unprecedented numbers. But you're right; if they don't make it to the World Series, does it matter?
So what does value mean?
Right.
And we have our opinions, and you at home might have a different opinion, and the Baseball Writers Association of America, they have their different opinions too. So there's no blueprint for the votes. I think that whoever, obviously Braves fans want him to win MVP, but whoever is supporting him and his own skill set and his own statistical output, power to you. He deserves some votes. I don't think anyone's going to win a unanimous MVP this year.
Fair.
So, and it will come down to the wire with Bellinger and Yelich. I think right now Bellinger gets my vote. If I were to have a vote, maybe one day I will. But Yelich could...
For your consideration.
We've seen it before. Yelich could hit 5 homers in the next week, and the Brewers could surge into the NL Central lead and win the division by a couple games. Then maybe it's his award to win.
I think it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Look, I think a third-place finish for Acuna in his first real year is absolutely an amazing starting point.
100%.
This is the potential that people saw in him immediately, it seemed. Really, so I heard about him through the minor league grapevine, just like, here's this guy in A+. Wasn't there for very long. Here's this guy in AA. Maybe we'll see him in AAA by the end of the year type of deal 2 years ago, I think, right? So everybody knew that he could be that guy for so long. And,
so talented.
And he's amazingly talented, and he's proven that he's made good on all of those investments. And that's incredible. And unlike, American politics, which is how I led this segment, finishing third in the MVP race is nothing to sneeze at. If you finish third in the presidential election, no one's going to remember you. But if you finish third in a National League MVP in an offensive record-setting year like this across baseball, that's a pretty good starting point for a career.
One last thing, the other thing I just thought of, and similar to what we said with the Mets, how they just had a really great month. Acuna's not even considered in this if he doesn't hit as many home runs as he has in the last couple weeks. If he has only 1 home run in August instead of 9, then math is hard, but he's over 10 home runs back in the race. He has far less RBIs, and it's a different story altogether. So when you're thinking of a most valuable player for the entire 2019 season...
Great catch.
Thank you. I almost dropped my pen.
It's a defensive run saved.
When you're looking at the entire 2019 season, I don't think you can necessarily consider him with the same oomph as Yelich and Bellinger.
That consistency across
the
year.
He's not the only player to be insanely hot in the month of August.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great pick for the Buenhombre of the week, what Acuna's done. And you want to talk about newsworthiness. I mean, how about breaking records? Setting and breaking records. Aristides Aquino, you knew we couldn't go this episode without talking about him. I think the most newsworthy person in Major League Baseball right now. Record-setting young man, just called up to the Cincinnati Reds thanks to the Yasiel Puig trade. That's the only reason he's up right now.
Really?
And this is the call-up corner of this week, no question about it. Tied the Major League record, becoming the second player ever to hit 7 home runs in his first 10 games. Now he's done himself one better. 9 home runs, 9 career home runs in his first 14 career games.
MLB record.
An MLB record for this guy. He played 1 game, I think, at the very end of last season. The Reds called him up in October. Like you mentioned, there's some spillover games.
Yeah.
He played 1 game. Really,
it looks like he went 0 for 1 with a strikeout.
Okay, there you go. So he got his first at-bat in a game that meant absolutely nothing for a bad team.
It's probably a pinch hit at bat.
And you're exactly right. And now he's up because Puig is gone and they have a space.
His spot.
And it's his spot, and there is no reason that he's going to let this go. This guy, for absolute lack of a better word, I can't think of a better word for it, has absolutely blasted onto the scene this week. It's absolutely incredible what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. They call him the Punisher for a reason. I've watched a lot of highlights of him now because of just how...
I thought you were going to say Marvel TV series.
Well, I mean, his power, his stance...
The stance is...
It's all unique, but also you just can't take your eyes off of it. And he had 3 home runs in a game against the Cubs, and it was the 4th inning. And then the Cubs pitched around him and walked him and then didn't let him get on for the rest of that game. He could have had 4 home runs, and he hadn't even played in a dozen games yet. That's insane. That's something you've never seen before. And so he passes Trevor Story's record, and that's a couple years ago now. Yeah. And when we saw that happen, we're like, there's no way anyone could ever match this kind of production in their first 10 games. No way.
Sure.
And now this guy bursts on the scene. People can't even say his name right. That's how new he is. Yeah. And, we were talking about this, the Journalism 101. I want to just ask him how to pronounce his name. I think it's Aristides Aquino.
Aristides Aquino, I believe.
And it's
not 100% sure.
For my New Yorkers out there, it's kind of like Gristides, but not really, the grocery store. But anyways.
Specific reference.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
He's also not just hitting home runs, which if you don't look at the stats and you're not a Reds fan, you might not know this, but as of Thursday afternoon, he has 17 hits, 17 RBI. He's hitting .386 and slugging over 1,000. So it's not just, another famous Red, Adam Dunn. It's not just solo home runs and strikeouts every other at bat. He's crushing the ball right now, and not only over the fence, but in the field of play as well.
I think that's very valuable, obviously, and he's made the headlines with the home runs, but he can hit as well. He's proven that. One home run I saw him hit against the Nationals this week was a slider, I think outside of the zone. He's a righty, and our righty pitcher threw him a slider away. And he, like you mentioned, a really open stance, but he comes in, he brings that front leg way in as fast as possible. He just reached at a pitch that was way out of the zone, pushed it over the right. It wasn't in the corner over the right field fence, but over the right field fence.
Flick of the wrist.
That's exactly what it is, and this is what we almost exactly different pitch, obviously, but just it reminded me of what you said when we first talked about Yordan Alvarez this year.
Yeah,
it was a very difficult pitch to hit. Obviously, most of them are, but he lifted a changeup blown away. Alvarez did, and then Aquino just punched a slider that looked way off the plate. I don't remember who the pitcher was, and he just took it out of the park with absolute ease.
Yeah.
Looked like there was no effort involved at all.
And that Sunday that Aquino hit 3 home runs was also a Sunday that Alvarez hit 3 home runs.
Okay, that's right. It's
Remember?
true. Two rookies with 3 home run days. I forget how many times that's happened.
Yeah,
Not often.
and Aquino isn't even a top-rated prospect.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. So we had to look up his background because, I didn't know who he was, and that's excusable. But for someone who follows pipeline and minor leagues and that stuff religiously, and you're familiar with a lot of names, you didn't necessarily know who he was before you looked him up either.
Yeah, you're right. This was when he got the first home runs that he was hitting this week. I was like, I couldn't remember this name, and it's obviously a very unique name. Like you said, we barely even still know how to pronounce. Like you say, I happen to know a few prospects here and there, and we've talked about other prospects that everybody's been well aware of over the last year or so. I'm thinking of Brandon Rogers. Keston Hiura was a top draft pick. We can go on with people that I've featured in Call-Up Corner this year. This is not one of those guys. Was off the 40-man.
Wow.
He was cut off the 40-man at the end of last year, and the Reds then re-signed him to like a minor league tender or whatever the next day. He's the 20. Let's back up a little bit further. The 2016 Organization Player of the Year in the minor leagues.
Wow.
So that's high praise.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a AAA All-Star to be that. You can set the world on fire in single A and be named the minor league organization player of the year. It happens frequently, and it's usually pretty high praise, and the team decides that, etc. So that was the honor in 2016. Those players have decent track records. Not a sure thing, but they have good track records. So that's a great sign. And then he was in the top 20 prospects after that. But he's since dropped out as he scuffled at AA the last couple of years. Has home runs, I think, I'll look it up, 37 home runs in about 250 games over 2 years at AA in 2017 and 2018. And then after that, his slash line was very mediocre, especially for all those home runs.
Too.
I mean, the minor, for sure. And you just mentioned his slash line now. So supposedly, and I haven't heard the story, in full depth, but his super open stance is very unique.
New?
It's new. New as of, I think, the start of 2019.
And it's the complete opposite of what Stanton did. Because
Where he
Stanton
completely
closed
closed.
himself so far, and then he won the MVP.
Okay.
And now, I want batting stance guy to jump
he's
on
He's
this.
on it already. I think
You
I've
think
seen
so?
it. Yeah, I
Oh,
think I
there you
have
go.
seen it. I love it. I love batting stances. I love pitcher windups. I love all these intricacies that
Yeah.
really only exist in this sport. So it's a new batting stance as of the start of this year, and it's worked wonders. He hit 300 in AAA with 28 home runs. So they finally brought him up with the new stance. They saw it in spring training, like, all right, look, we're going to give you this opportunity or whatever it was, and lo and behold, and now, but he still wasn't even on the top 30 prospects. He's not on there right now. He doesn't have the service time yet to get taken off the list. So he had dropped that far from being their organization best player in 2016. So that just shows, and this is just MLB pipeline because he is still top 25 in Baseball America and some other sources. But he had just, regardless of that, overall his stock had dropped in his career the last couple of years. That's fair to say. But now he's here, and there's no reason that he won't be here to stay. This is an absolutely incredible story, and look, I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. This is the definition of Call-Up Corner.
It is.
Some guy out of nowhere
It
is
really
having
is.
this much success, and Keston Hiura is the other best example that I can
Sure.
think of that. He's been tremendous this year, and he's going to be a starter for a playoff-chasing team, I think. So, and after he got sent down that one time for Travis Shaw, I haven't heard from him since. So I think this guy is here to stay for the rest of the year, and this bodes well for next year, I would imagine.
Well, that's, first of all, another week, another segment talking about the Reds.
That's so true.
Right? I don't know if you were thinking about that, and we've mentioned this before, but the Reds always somehow make it onto our shows. I don't know what it is.
I'm going to make a
considering-
compilation because you're right.
Yeah,
Every
we
single
really need
week.
to.
Every single week we talk about this team.
But what I was going to say is, it seems like almost 2 months ago now we were talking about Derek Dietrich being Buenhombre of the week, hitting an insane amount of home runs against the Pirates in like a week span, multi-home run games, crushing the ball, tons of excitement. Derek Dietrich is not in his prime or leading into his prime. He's not a prospect. He's in the tail end of his career, and he probably won't be in Cincinnati for much longer. Who knows?
Sure.
But now we're talking about a young, apparently he's a stud, and this bodes well for 2020 in, I like to say, the best division in all of baseball because of just how competitive these 5 teams are, save the Pirates, I guess. And
bad news for them this week, too.
Right, with Tyone going down for TJ surgery.
He'll be out all next year, yeah.
But what I was going to say is, we talked about this on the Triple Play last week, how the Reds get Kevin Gausman, and the upside there is he's a former ace. You potentially re-sign him with Trevor Bauer, and you've got 2 more great upside, incredible starters to go along with Luis Castillo and the rest of your rotation. If Aquino is all of a sudden a, top 5% of the league power threat, you've all of a sudden slotted in your 3-hole in that order, and now that Joey Votto is on the tail end of his career too, and he's not the same threat as he was, you now have someone new, and you're replacing Puig. So you get Trevor Bauer back, you got to hope that he re-signs to really win that trade, but you're not exactly giving up as much as you thought you were in terms of trading away Puig, at least.
If you've got this kind of heir apparent, it seems.
And who knows what he's going to do in a full season. It's kind of like the Acuna thing, a smaller sample size, but bursts onto the scene, huge power, and he's only done this for about 15 games now. We'll see what he does for the rest of the year. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt or something. Okay. But if he gets to play a full season in 2020, we're certainly looking at Rookie of the Year. I don't know how eligibility works. I don't think that a month and a half, 2 months is going to rule him out.
I'll go ahead and say I don't think so. Okay. I'm not positive, but I don't think that would.
So early pick for National League Rookie of the Year in 2020, but that's not a bad team in 2020. I don't know if we're going to go ahead and predict that they're going to make the postseasons or something. Then that's a little too far, I think, as of now. But if you're general manager in Cincy or the manager or someone who's going to be around leading that team next year, you are happy. Let's
go to the hot button issue that we wanted to talk about this week. It's not an issue. I'm joking with you. This is something that this episode has absolutely flown by. We've had a lot of awesome conversations already. So we're going to take a step back and talk about something a little bit more frivolous, I guess. So I just saw a tweet on Cut 4 earlier Thursday afternoon. We know Cut 4 loves to do silly stuff, position player pitching and all that stuff. They're an awesome account. They do great work. So this afternoon, they tweeted out a take on the classic video game NBA Jam. So I know this is a specific reference for our audience here. I know you might all be baseball fans, but if you're sports fans like us, maybe you remember this game. I'm certainly not a huge NBA fan. You might have picked that up just from listening to us this year. Even I know NBA Jam. I love it. So classic arcade-style game that's been revamped once or twice over the years. 2-on-2 basketball. Everybody can do a little bit of everything. The dunks are high-powered. Most players can hit threes. Things like that.
And the court's super small. It's back and forth.
Alley-oops all over the place. You can block any shot. You can block dunks. All this stuff. It's a nutso game.
I think it resurged a little bit with the mobile app.
Right. I have that. That's why I play it often.
But it used to be on consoles too. Yep. I bet it's on consoles still.
It probably is. So I wish it were updated now because I think it would be killer with some of the 1-2s that we've got in the NBA right now. Anyway, so that's the take. That's the foundation of this. So now you might wonder, what does this have to do with this show? I'll tell you. So Cut 4 proposed we take NBA Jam and make it MLB Jam. So it's not as perfect, but the essence is for every single team, you take the best hitter and the best pitcher, and you make that your 2-man team, and then you play against another team like that. So like we said, for the NBA, it's 2-on-2. So right now you would pick LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and you'd go against any other twosome in the league, maybe. So that's how it would work now. So for the MLB, you would take the best hitter and the best pitcher on any team and try to win the league like that. What does the game look like? I don't know. Fortunately, Max kind of knows because somehow or another, this random suggestion from people that we don't know, have no connection to, this suggestion actually goes right in line with something that you've been developing and working on a pitch for a little while.
A pitch, no pun intended.
No, I didn't mean to say that.
So this is an idea that kind of came to me in terms of revamping MLB All-Star Week to try to have more exciting little segments and little games kind of like what they do with the Pro Bowl with dodgeball and stuff like that, or the skills challenge in the NBA. But this is a little different. I want to say years ago that in MLB The Show, which I used to play every year growing up, there was a mode on my PSP, I can see it right now,
nice.
where you picked a hitter and a pitcher, and you go against the CPU, and you hit like signs. It was like not an actual stadium. You would hit targets over the fence and accrue points, and you get strikeout points when you were pitching. So you'd switch off every inning, and then you would have to get more points than the CPU, and then you would win.
Okay.
So here's an idea. We have the 32 teams. Now the only difference here is that in the Cut 4 version, for example, the Brewers, it's Christian Yelich and Josh Hader.
Pick the best hitter and the best pitcher on the team.
So in this sense, relievers apply.
Sure.
But, and bear with me here, I'm going to explain this. A March Madness style bracket with all 32 teams seeding based on, let's say, record at the end of this season. Each round is a 5-inning game. So 15 outs for each team to get. You choose the best starting pitcher on your team and the best hitter, and you go back and forth like a typical game. So I stopped the Cut 4 GIF on the Phillies. You'd have Bryce Harper hitting. You'd have Nola pitching. And then let's say you're going against the Nationals. It would probably be Juan Soto and Max Scherzer. So that means Scherzer pitches to Harper, tries to get 3 outs, and then you switch. Nola pitches to Soto. So now, what about defense? Well, you pick 8 defenders to go out into the field, and I know that there might be bias in some sense if you're a former teammate, if you played with someone in the minors, if you play with them in college. So you might try to root for someone, but in this specific scenario, we were talking about this, they're shadows of themselves, and they're going to do whatever it takes. They're the best 8 defenders in the league. They're going to do whatever it takes to make the play, make the throw, get the outs.
I pictured it like shadow versions, like another classic game, Super Smash Bros. Brawl or whatever, Super Smash Brothers, where it's shadow Kevin Kiermaier out in center field, shadow Andrelton Simmons at shortstop or whatever it is. So it's got all of the aspects, all of the attributes of Andrelton Simmons, and he's going to play shortstop to the best of his abilities. But if Mike Trout is the hitter in this simulated game, wouldn't let a dribbler go past him into center field to help out his
They're
teammates.
not trying to help either team because they play defense for both.
Right. Okay.
So at the end of the 5th inning, whoever has more runs wins, advances to the next round.
So how do you score?
So how do you score? We'll stick with the same Phillies-Nationals matchup. If Bryce Harper hits a double off of Scherzer, he runs to second. He's safe at second. He then walks back to the batter's box. If he hits another double, the run scores. We're not going to put base runners out there, and obviously we're trying to make this as real life as possible, so he can't clone himself. Because then if you put someone else on his team out there, it's different speed, or the best runner, Billy Hamilton, whatever, it's different speed. So it changes, that's a variable.
So they're ghost runners basically, like backyard rules.
It's like, you're playing before a Little League game, you're messing around with your teammates, and you have to argue, maybe Harper hits a single there, so that's when the umpires come in, and they'll rule, oh, he would have been safe or he would have been out at home, and maybe if the outfielder is Josh Reddick, who has a tremendous arm, then they're going to throw him out, or whoever else. I'm not thinking of JJ Reddick, right?
No, you said Josh Reddick.
Yeah, okay. The NBA Jam is messing with me.
That's true. We are messing with you. JJ Reddick would be decent at NBA Jam if you need some threes.
Right. Anyways, so that's the plan. 32 teams, probably Dodgers facing off with the Tigers or Orioles in the first round. And then the cool thing about this is, and we narrowed down our top 15, we wrote them down, is that every team really is a threat here. You can't just assume that the Orioles are bad because they have one good hitter and they have a decent pitcher who might have 5 strong innings.
So as a team right now, the Orioles are really bad. But, these are all obviously good athletes, full stop.
Major leaguers.
But everybody seems to, you try to build a core, obviously, so you have supposedly that middle of the order hitter or top of the order hitter, depending on how you shake it out, and that front of the staff pitcher That's obviously what you build around, and every team has that to an extent. Obviously, some are better than others, and some are more successful than others. But the Orioles, like you say, the team is bad, and the team is unsuccessful, but they still have Trey Mancini, who's a great hitter, and Dylan Bundy's at the top of their rotation right now, but John Means was an all-star this year. Every team has to have an all-star, so take that how you will. But John Means could be a really good pitcher, so that would be who would probably be on this team in this situation.
And that's just one example. Now, the disadvantage here is for a team like the Brewers, where Josh Hader is their representation on this cut for GIF. But in this situation, Josh Hader's not going to go 5 innings. The manager wouldn't let them.
So you're right. That's the difference.
It has to be a starter.
Right. So that's the difference that I didn't press you on. 5 innings is the length of this game, rather than 9 innings. Because you want one pitcher to, in theory, be available. Right.
We tried to split a 9-inning game in half. We were considering 7, but that's still a little long because there are probably going to be some extra innings here. And the other cool thing that you keep an eye on is maybe it's, I don't know, Orioles, Dodgers, and Trey Mancini is obviously not the hitter that Bellinger is, but what if Mancini gets the lefty-righty matchup with Kershaw, and he's going to see him 15 times and more if he gets any hits?
Sure.
These are all MLB hitters. They're going to get accustomed to pitchers. So I think here it's advantage hitter. I think this cool tournament is going to have a lot of upsets and high-scoring games. I think it would be so cool to make this happen. Obviously, there's probably no way, especially in an all-star game. In the middle of the season, you wouldn't want someone to get hurt.
You wouldn't play all these games.
And
either.
Why would they do this in the off-season either? So we can only dream that this will happen. Maybe it's a MLB The Show mode someday.
It's a mode, sure.
But the fun way that Tim and I wanted to go about this is we both respectively came up with our Final Four, to use March Madness terminology.
Here's our top 15 in front of us, just for fun.
So we have the top 15 in front of us.
We tried to pare down all the teams in Major League Baseball, and we determined who we thought was the top hitter on every team and the top starting pitcher using that caveat, and now we've got the top half of the league.
We narrowed it down to half, and then from there, each of us chose our Final Four. We haven't told each other what they are yet. How do you want to go about this?
I haven't thought about it so far. I mean, I can go first if you want.
Okay.
So we've got our top 15. We had some debate.
This was so hard.
This was honestly,
to choose.
This was really hard. Because like you say, look, so this is hard. Max and I think similarly as you've deduced on the show, but we make a good broadcast booth because we've got really the more of the hitter guy and more of the pitcher guy in terms of our allegiances or whatever. Obviously, I didn't play baseball anywhere near as long as you have, so I can't really call myself a former pitcher. But regardless, so I'm biased towards pitchers is really what I'm saying here, is generally how it shows.
Sure.
I think that, even with that said, I think that kind of to your point, it's advantage hitter overall in this format because a pitcher could roll through the first, let's just say, 3 innings of this format and not allow any of these hypothetical runs. But now, like you say, you're seeing, if we imagine the pitcher is perfect, doesn't allow any singles or anything like that through the first 3 innings, now you're seeing the same pitcher, the same hitter is seeing the same pitcher for the 10th time. So even for a pitcher that is throwing a complete game in a normal situation, if you're the leadoff hitter, maybe you're seeing me for the 4th time. And you might be sitting there in the dugout watching me work the whole time and thinking, all right, look, this guy's done this, and I know my tendencies and all that stuff. You're still only faced me 4 times throughout the game. Right. Now you face me for the 10th time.
And in quick succession.
Right, so I would have a little bit of a break here and there or whatever while the other pitcher is going, but I'm not breaking that much. And I'm also now facing you, the top or the middle of the order hitter, not bottom of the order hitters every time or a pitcher spot or something like that.
And as a pitcher throws more pitches, they make more mistakes.
Right, fatigue and everything is very much a thing. So we gave 5 innings, not 7, to try to help with fatigue a little bit. Maybe we expect starters to get through 5 generally, unless you're the Rays or whatever and want to pull a guy after 3 innings. Anyway, so I think it's very much advantage hitter. Even still, I think the way I went with all of these, with my 4 picks, they're going to be my Final 4 in some order. And obviously, we don't know how the matchups work or whatever, so they could play each other in the 3rd round and everything, goes up
just
flames.
The best Final 4.
That's I picked my 4 best pairings, is what I did. Even with all of what I just said about it being advantage hitter, I think you have to have a great pitcher.
Yeah.
If you don't have a great pitcher, you don't have a chance in this made-up game.
Right.
I think that. So look, that's All right, look, I'll just reveal my choices here in a second.
Yeah.
I think that the Angels are not a very good team this year, but you have Mike Trout. So I think if you have Mike Trout, you have a chance in any sort of baseball game.
But who's your pitcher?
And maybe a football game too. I don't know. But I think Shohei Ohtani is your pitcher.
We're also assuming full health here.
Of course.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Right, everybody's full health and plays as well as we think they can, or as well as they've proven. I don't think Shohei Ohtani is good enough to get the Angels to the Final Four. Could that pairing win them a few games? You better believe it, because Trout could put up 10 runs by himself.
Right.
That might be enough. We don't know.
Sure.
Never seen a game like this before.
Right.
So with all that said, all 4 of my teams have great hitters that can do a little bit of everything and true ace pitchers.
Okay.
I can't go away from that format.
Okay.
So I want to pick somebody like the Angels.
Yeah.
Because I think Mike Trout could
It's
win
hard
this.
not to pick just based on the hitter,
Right.
is what you're saying.
Right, absolutely.
I grappled with that too.
So I've got 4 pitchers that on their day I think have proven to be, so in 2019, perhaps not, you can make an argument, but in some order, here we go.
I'll
So
write T next year is when you
Sure,
put them.
all right, so in some order, the Nationals, Juan Soto and Max Scherzer. The Astros, Jose Altuve and Justin Verlander.
Okay.
The Red Sox,
Okay.
Mookie Betts and Chris Sale. And then my champion, the Dodgers, Cody Bellinger and Clayton Kershaw. Maybe you give Hyunjin Ryu the nod. I think for this format, just in terms of longevity, etc., you give it to Clayton Kershaw. But those are my 4 pairings. So what do we have in common? True ace pitchers. Scherzer and Verlander, we know I've been a fan of those 2 for a long time. Though their accolades are unquestionable. Again, I think on his day, Chris Sale could beat anybody, even the same hitter, even Mike Trout, on the balance over 15 outs. And you balance that. Now, the flip side is that we've got other ace pitchers on this list. But I don't want to steal your thunder too much more than I already have. The reason I went with these guys is that these hitters can do everything.
Yep.
Cody Bellinger has now 40 home runs this year and only 9 steals or whatever it is, but he doesn't just hit home runs. So like Jose Abreu and Lucas Giolito, I think is a great pairing. I think Eloy Jimenez and Lucas Giolito would be a better pairing. Because Eloy Jimenez can do everything. Mookie Betts can do everything.
Sure
He hits
can.
a lot of home runs
He sure
and
can.
hits doubles and hits triples and almost hits for the cycle and all that stuff. So that is why I think the Red Sox could win a situation like this. And
Absolutely.
as it stands, they're not going to make the playoffs in 2019. So it hinges on how good Chris Sale is. Again, on his day, I think Chris Sale could do anything. And look, I could go on. I love this. I love NBA Jam.
It's
I love
such
this
a cool
idea.
idea.
This was your big idea,
Yeah.
though. This is your game. Who do you have winning your game?
Okay, so I've been grinning ear to ear because of just how similar our thought process is. And I swear, we did not talk about this. We kept it to ourselves. I went the exact same route, choosing more so the pitcher and then trying to choose a versatile hitter.
Okay.
So I didn't choose the Angels. I didn't choose a team with the hitter first. I went pitcher first.
Okay.
So I'll go through them. I have 3 of the same.
Okay.
And then one
In
wild card
in one
team.
wild card. Okay.
Yeah.
This
I
is
didn't want it to
this
be
is-
too chalky.
I was afraid of that too. I
Right.
thought Boston might have been actually, surprisingly enough, might have been my
And
my
it's
dark horse.
It's hard not to be chalky, especially when you're filling out a bracket for March Madness. It's the same thing. The Dodgers could lose in the first round. Bellinger could face a lefty.
Sure.
And not do as well.
That's a great point.
And Kershaw could unravel in the third.
It's a playoff game, you know.
These are playoff games, and Kershaw's not good in the playoffs.
Maybe this gives switch hitters an inherent advantage. Who knows?
Don't steal, but come on,
I'm
Tim.
sorry.
Okay,
No, shut
so
up. I'll back out of the frame. Bye.
So I have the Red Sox.
Okay.
I have Houston.
Okay.
I have the Dodgers. I don't have the Nationals. I wanted to pick the Nationals. You know how big of a Max Scherzer guy I am. But I choose the Indians. I chose the Indians. Because, and like you said, switch hitting. I think that Corey Kluber, at his best and at health, could have the potential to dominate in this league, this tournament-style format. And if you look at on our top 15, you guys obviously don't see this, but there are barely any switch hitters on here. Frankie Lindor is, I would wager to say, the best switch hitter on this list of the top 15 pitcher-hitter duos that we decided. That means that any pitcher that comes at Francisco Lindor in this format, he will be able to face from the other side. You can't say that for Mookie Betts. You can't say that for Altuve. You can't say that for Bellinger. I think they're good enough to get through this tournament, but I think that Francisco Lindor balances out with the fact that Kluber is not the best pitcher here, but he has the ceiling to absolutely dominate 5-inning games and get 15 outs, giving up only a couple runs. Because like I said, I think this is going to be dominated by offenses. But then again, as it's dominated by offenses, you have to choose the pitchers that are going to, try to condense the domination by offenses. I don't think there are going to be any shutouts, certainly no perfect games, nothing like that. But if you can limit a hitter to 3 or 4 runs here, and I think that Sale, Verlander, and Kershaw, and maybe even Garrett Cole for the Astros. We never really decided that. I mean, we put down Verlander, but it was originally Cole/Verlander.
I picked one.
Both of them would work, especially this year for Cole.
That's for sure.
And I think that Kluber-Lindor is a pretty effective duo. I don't know who would necessarily win. It's such a toss-up. I might have to give Houston the edge just because of how good Jose Altuve is at his best in terms of versatility. Because again, sure, Bellinger could hit you a bunch of homers here, but I could see Altuve just getting so used to another pitcher facing them over and over again that he's just going to be spraying balls in the gap and then occasionally running into it and getting 3-run homers. And if he catches a rhythm, I don't think anything stops him.
This is the fascinating thing about this game. There's so many permutations that we can create for this scenario that you've concocted here. I think one of the other points here is the ghost runners situation rather than having actual runners. So you pick, some of the best base runners in the league. So, the ghost of Billy Hamilton or, Kevin Kiermaier, I've said before, somebody
Terrence
like
Gore.
that. Terrence Gore, sure, Jared Dyson, people like that. Maybe those are your automatic base runners. But if that's the case, then I want a singles hitter. I don't want to diminish him, but I would love Eddie Rosario in that case. If you've got, let's make them all twins. If you got Byron Buxton on second, I would love Eddie Rosario to come up and just poke a single or maybe a double into right field, scores Buxton without you even having to worry about it.
Sure.
But if you have just given runner, a league average runner, so a competent guy could steal base if needed, if that's who's on second, then maybe you still want a home run. So now if I'm the Twins, I might rather have Nelson Cruz because I would guarantee a home run.
Yeah,
so it depends on the rules of the game, right? So that's why I think in this situation, in this situation and in any situation, I'd rather play it safe and have players that can do, hitters that can do everything, which is why I would go with Mookie Betts or Jose Altuve.
I tried to choose my gapper guys. And Bellinger, I don't really consider that much of a gapper guy anymore just because of his home run potential. But when I think of the Red Sox, I think of Mookie Betts doubles in the gap off the monster. And Altuve is just that. And then Lindor, he's not having a earth-shattering year because he's been hurt a bunch of it, but that's what I picture when I think of Lindor. And the fact that he's able to, in the first couple rounds, face all southpaws and hit from the right side. And then in the championship, he's not forced to stay from that side. He can switch if the pitcher's from a different team, a different side of the arm.
I think this is absolutely fast. Look, some other teams that we've talked about in this episode of Good Hacks, look, the Braves weren't even on our top 15.
No, because their pitching wouldn't have been good enough.
Right, so they don't have a starting pitcher that we would trust in this game. Like, who would you go with? Foltynewicz has been in the minor. That was who Cut 4 went to, which was funny because he's been in the minors a lot of the year.
Touki Toussaint. Mike Soroka. We didn't think of Mike Soroka.
Yeah, that's true.
Shoot. They'd probably be on there then.
I would blame Cut 4 for that because they put Foltynewicz on their short list and not Soroka.
But that's the situation there.
That's a really good point.
We talked about Acuna. He could carry them single-handedly.
Yeah.
Trout could carry the Angels single-handedly. I think that another really good option here is the Mets.
Yep.
Because Pete Alonso has proven that he can hit the ball like crazy and have RBIs and extra base hits. And Jacob deGrom is one of the best pitchers on this list.
True. There are so many guys that I would peg as, so many pairings, I should say, that I've got pegged as like my number 6 choice.
Yeah.
I made my top 4, and then these guys are my number 6.
And
but I have 3 guys on that. I have 3 teams on that list.
And if you're filling out NCAA March Madness bracket, you got to pick some upsets. You got to take some 6 seeds.
Sure.
Or you even go all out and take UMBC in the first round, and the Orioles go on a run. So
it's possible.
Everything is possible in this format. We may never see it come to fruition at any level, but we just wanted you guys to think about it. I think that it's such a cool idea, and maybe they can even do some sort of like simulation in MLB The Show. I've seen a lot of franchise simulations. I'm a Marlins guy. I've seen a lot of people simulate the Marlins farm system and what it's going to look like in a couple years down the road. This would be so cool to do it 100 times and see who wins the most amount of times. I'm just fascinated by this idea. It's my idea, so that's why. But
there's endless possibilities
Yep.
for something like this, for something that doesn't even exist. So I think that proves that it's a cool idea,
Sure.
unique, if absolutely nothing else. We hope you enjoyed playing MLB Jam with us. You've been listening to this whole way. Tell us what your best pairing would be if we missed a
we'd
top
love to hear from
15.
you.
Tell us what you think. Give us your final 4 or maybe your champion. Who would you pick if you were playing this MLB Jam? Who would you back if you were following this tournament that Max has created for all-star games in the future, things like that? Let us know. We want to hear from you. If you got any questions to ask, any topics you'd like us to discuss next week or in the future, hit us up. We're always available. Follow us on Twitter, on YouTube, on Anchor, on Spotify, anywhere that you want to. There's a magnifying glass. You can follow us even closer, whatever you want. We appreciate you being with us. He's Max. I'm Tim. We've been Good Hacks. We'll see you next time. Until then, so long.